The morning was bright, yet inside his heart there was a sense of nervous excitement. The man who owned the company had spent years building his business, but now he wanted to know the truth about what happened in the corners of his stores when no cameras were watching and no supervisors were reporting. On paper, everything looked fine. Sales were steady, reports from managers were filled with positive remarks, and employee turnover seemed low. But he had a feeling that reports alone could not capture reality. Numbers told one story, but people's faces told another. And so, he had decided to go undercover, to become just another worker among many. He prepared carefully. Instead of his usual suit and polished shoes, he wore jeans, a plain shirt, and an old jacket. His hair was slightly messy, and he carried himself not with the authority of a boss but with the modest appearance of someone just trying to get through the day. He even wore glasses he did not need, adding to the disguise. No one who looked at him would think he was the man signing paychecks and making big decisions at company headquarters. As he walked into one of the busiest branches, he felt an unusual mix of pride and worry. Pride, because this store had been one of the first he had opened, and worry, because he wanted to see it at its most real, without any masks. He reminded himself to stay calm, to observe, to listen, and not to let his emotions give him away too quickly. The store was bustling with activity. Customers walked in and out with shopping bags, the faint sound of music played from a speaker, and employees hurried around with the kind of speed only people in retail understood. He took a deep breath and looked around. His eyes landed on the front counter, where a young cashier was standing. At first, she seemed like any other employee, greeting customers with a small smile and ringing up their purchases. But then he noticed something different. Her eyes looked red, as though she had been crying recently. Every now and then, she quickly wiped her cheek when she thought no one was watching. Yet, even with tears trying to escape, she forced a smile each time a customer stepped forward. The undercover boss stopped for a moment, observing carefully. He felt a knot form in his stomach. Why was she crying during her shift? Was it something personal? Was it because of a customer? Or was it something happening inside the store? He couldn't help but feel concerned. Employees were the heart of his company, and to see one in pain was unsettling. He decided not to approach her immediately. Instead, he took a place in line like a regular customer, just to see her interactions more closely. The line moved slowly, and he noticed how she handled each customer with patience, though her voice occasionally cracked. One customer was impatient and raised his voice when a small error occurred, but she apologized quickly, fixed it, and continued. Her hands shook slightly as she handed over the change. When it was his turn, he greeted her softly. She responded with a polite nod, but her eyes quickly looked away. He wanted to ask her if she was all right, but he knew he had to be careful. For now, he kept it simple, making small talk. She answered in short words, always polite, always professional, but her sadness was clear. As he walked away with his purchase, his mind was already working. Something wasn't right. He had promised himself that going undercover was not only about checking systems and procedures but about understanding the human side of the business. And right now, the human side was hurting. He found a place to sit in the corner of the store where he could still observe. The cashier tried to hide her emotions, but every now and then, the sadness slipped through. She turned her face slightly when customers weren't looking, as if silently fighting tears. And when the rush of customers slowed for a moment, she leaned on the counter, her shoulders heavy, like the weight of the world was pressing down on them. The undercover boss felt a strong urge to walk up to her and say, "It's okay, you don't have to hide it," but he held back. He reminded himself that the goal was to understand the bigger picture, not just react in the moment. Still, his heart ached. He decided to use his cover identity as a new trainee. When the store manager introduced him briefly to the staff later, he made sure to stand quietly among them. The cashier gave him a faint smile of welcome, the kind you give a stranger you've just met, and then returned to her work. During the next hour, he pretended to be learning simple tasks, stocking shelves, helping in small ways, but his mind was half on the job and half on the young cashier. Every time she turned to face another customer, he noticed the effort she put into looking fine. Every time she looked away, he saw the truth in her eyes. He began to wonder about her story. Was she struggling with something at home? Or was it connected to the job? Did someone mistreat her here? His curiosity grew stronger, but along with it came a sense of responsibility. He had built this company with the dream that people working here would feel respected and supported. To see one of his own employees hiding tears behind a smile was like a blow to that dream. The undercover boss reminded himself that patience was key. He could not rush to conclusions, nor could he reveal who he was just yet. If he did, people would change their behavior instantly, and he would never learn the truth. For now, he had to watch, listen, and slowly earn the trust of the people around him. Still, he could not shake the image of the cashier's trembling hands. He thought about his own beginnings, how he once worked small jobs where every dollar mattered, where every manager's word could affect his future. He remembered how it felt to be unseen, to be just another face behind a counter. And now, even though he was a boss, he understood that the emotions of his employees were as real and as fragile as his once had been. By the end of the day, the sight of that cashier stayed in his heart. The undercover journey had just begun, but already he knew it was going to reveal more than just work habits. It was going to reveal human stories, raw and unfiltered. And perhaps, it was going to test him not as a businessman, but as a human being. He walked out of the store that evening with his disguise intact, but his thoughts heavy. The young cashier's tears had opened a door to a reality he could not ignore. Something was wrong, and he was determined to find out what it was. And deep inside, he already knew this undercover mission was about to change not just his company, but also his understanding of leadership forever. The next morning, he returned to the store early. His disguise was the same: plain clothes, glasses, and a simple cap pulled low. He looked like a man who belonged behind the shelves rather than at a boardroom table. He wanted no one to even imagine who he truly was. The store was quieter at this hour. The shelves needed arranging, the floor needed cleaning, and the staff were preparing for the rush of customers that would soon arrive. The undercover boss quietly joined in, helping another worker place items neatly on a display rack. His body blended into the rhythm of the store, but his mind was already looking toward the front counter. There she was again, the same cashier from yesterday. Her face looked tired, as though she hadn't slept much. Her eyes had that same redness, proof that tears had visited her recently. But once again, she wore that thin mask of a smile, trying to appear strong. Every time a customer approached, she stood straight, greeted them politely, and did her job as if nothing was wrong. But he saw it. He saw the slight shake of her hands when she scanned items. He saw how her shoulders fell when no one was watching. He noticed how her lips pressed together tightly, as if holding back emotions. The undercover boss felt a heaviness in his chest. He knew the signs. He remembered how, many years ago, he too had stood in jobs where he felt unseen, overworked, or mistreated. The feeling of carrying silent pain was one he had not forgotten. He decided to get closer. He pretended to be a new worker still learning his way around, so he asked if he could stand near the counter for a while to observe how things worked. The manager agreed without much thought, and so he found himself just a few steps away from the cashier, close enough to hear her tone and see the details in her expression. For a long time, he simply listened. The customers came and went. Some were kind and smiled back at her, and those moments seemed to give her a small spark of comfort. But others were impatient, snapping about prices or lines moving too slowly. Each time, she kept her calm, apologized, and handled the situation with quiet grace. Yet, in between customers, he saw her take deep breaths, as if trying to calm herself. She sometimes whispered small words to herself under her breath, like reminders to stay strong. It broke his heart to witness it. Finally, when the crowd slowed down, he walked casually closer. He carried a few items in his hand, pretending to be learning the system. "I'm new here," he said softly, "and I'm still trying to understand how everything works." "You seem really good at your job." She gave him a small, polite smile. "I've been here for a while," she replied. Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. "Do you like working here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. There was a small pause. She looked down at the counter, then back at him. "It's okay," she said finally. Her words were short, but her tone told a different story. He nodded gently, not wanting to push too hard. "You must be really patient. I saw how you handled that customer earlier. I don't think I could stay that calm." She gave a weak laugh, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You get used to it," she said softly. The undercover boss wanted to say more, to ask what was really wrong, but he could see that she wasn't ready. She kept looking away, pretending to arrange small papers on the counter, clearly avoiding eye contact. It was obvious she didn't trust him yet. And why would she? To her, he was just another worker she had met a day ago. So he stepped back, deciding not to push further. Instead, he would earn her trust slowly. Sometimes silence, patience, and small acts of kindness could open doors that direct questions could not. Over the next few hours, he continued to watch quietly. He noticed how other staff interacted with her. Some co-workers were friendly and supportive, sharing little jokes to lighten the mood. But he also noticed something else. Every time the store manager walked by, her entire body stiffened. Her smile would fade, her hands would tighten, and she became extra careful with every word and movement. This caught his attention sharply. He began to suspect that the reason behind her sadness was not outside the store, but within it. Later, during the lunch break, he found her sitting alone at a small table in the break room. She had a simple meal packed in a container, but she didn't seem to have much appetite. She just pushed the food around with her spoon. He sat down a few seats away, giving her space but still close enough to talk. After a moment, he asked softly, "Long day?" She shrugged. "It's always busy here," she replied, her eyes fixed on the table. He waited a little, then said, "You know, yesterday when I came in, I noticed you looked upset. And today too, I see it again. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but are you okay?" There was silence. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't respond. But then she let out a small sigh, her shoulders dropping as if a heavy weight pressed them down. "I'm fine," she said quickly, almost too quickly. But her trembling voice gave her away. The undercover boss didn't push. Instead, he said gently, "Sometimes saying I'm fine is harder than saying the truth. I used to do that all the time." Her eyes flicked toward him, studying his face. He looked simple, harmless, just another worker who might understand. She didn't know he was the boss, of course, but perhaps something in his calm voice gave her a little comfort. She still didn't open up fully, but she whispered, almost to herself, "It's just hard sometimes." He gave her a nod, showing he understood. "Life can be heavy," he said softly. "But I can see you're strong. You're here, doing your job, even when it's not easy. That takes courage." For the first time, she looked at him directly. Her eyes glistened, but she quickly blinked and turned away, pretending to check her phone. The conversation ended there, but he knew a small bridge of trust had been built. As the day continued, he stayed observant. He noticed again how her mood changed around the manager. The way she flinched at his sharp tone, the way her eyes lowered whenever he walked near it was all too clear. Something about that relationship was wrong. The undercover boss felt his heart grow heavier. He had come undercover to learn about the day-to-day challenges of his employees, but now he was beginning to uncover something deeper, something painful. He promised himself he would not ignore it. That night, as he left the store once again, his thoughts stayed with the cashier. He didn't know her whole story yet, but he knew enough to see she was struggling. She was carrying silent pain, and nobody seemed to notice, or maybe they noticed but chose not to act. He whispered to himself as he walked into the night, "I'll find out the truth. I won't let this go unseen." What had started as a simple undercover mission was slowly turning into a personal responsibility. He wasn't just there to check sales or customer service. He was there for her, and for every worker who might be silently crying behind a counter. And he knew, this was only the beginning. The following days passed with the undercover boss keeping his disguise and carefully observing everything inside the store. By now, he had settled into the role of a new worker. He helped stack shelves, carried boxes, and assisted customers whenever needed. To the staff, he was just another quiet employee trying to learn his way around. But behind his simple clothes and calm smile, his heart carried a heavy mission. His eyes often returned to the cashier. He noticed that her sadness was not something temporary. It wasn't just a bad day or a passing mood. It was something deeper, something that had been living with her for a long time. The way she hid her tears, the way her smile appeared forced, and the way she flinched whenever the manager approached it all painted a clear picture. One afternoon, the store was unusually crowded. Customers filled the aisles, and the line at the cashier's counter stretched long. The undercover boss worked near the front, helping to bag items for customers. This gave him the chance to stand right next to the cashier as she handled the register. At first, everything seemed normal. She greeted each customer, scanned the items, and gave change with her usual soft smile. But then the manager walked by. His voice was sharp, and his expression carried an air of disapproval. "You're moving too slowly," he snapped loudly, right in front of the waiting customers. The cashier's face paled. She quickly tried to speed up, but her hands trembled. She scanned items too quickly, accidentally pressing the wrong button. The manager rolled his eyes and muttered something under his breath, loud enough for the undercover boss to hear. It wasn't an insult with foul words, but the tone was filled with humiliation. Customers exchanged awkward glances. The undercover boss felt his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to stay quiet. The young cashier whispered an apology, her voice breaking slightly. She finished the transaction and handed the change with shaky fingers. The manager gave her one last cold look before walking away. The undercover boss saw her shoulders slump as soon as he disappeared. Her eyes looked glassy, as if she was trying hard not to cry again. That moment burned into his heart. He could no longer ignore what he was seeing. This wasn't just stress or exhaustion, this was mistreatment. Later that day, when the rush had ended, he found her sitting in the break room again. This time, she wasn't eating. She was simply staring at the floor, lost in her thoughts. He sat down slowly across from her, keeping his tone gentle. "You handled that rush really well today," he began. She gave a tired smile. "Not really. I always make mistakes." "That's not true," he said firmly. "I've been watching. You're patient, kind, and careful with customers. That's not easy to do when things get busy. You should give yourself some credit." She looked at him with surprise, as though she wasn't used to hearing kind words at work. After a moment, she sighed. "It doesn't matter. Nothing I do is ever enough." His heart tightened at her words. He leaned forward a little and spoke softly. "Is that what your manager tells you?" She froze, her eyes widening slightly. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, with a small nod, she whispered, He always says I'm slow. He says if I don't get better, he'll cut my hours. I can't afford that. The undercover boss stayed silent, letting her continue at her own pace. I need this job, she said, her voice trembling. My mom is sick, and I'm the only one supporting her and my younger siblings. If I lose hours, I don't know how we'll pay rent or buy medicine. So I just keep quiet. I let him say whatever he wants. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. I try not to cry in front of customers, but sometimes I can't help it. I feel so small here, like nothing I do matters. The undercover boss felt his chest ache with anger and sorrow. He wanted to reveal his identity right then, to tell her she wasn't alone, that she was safe. But he held himself back. If he revealed himself too early, he might not see the full truth of how the manager treated others as well. He needed to know the whole picture, not just one story. Instead, he offered her gentle words. You matter, he said firmly. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. You're doing your best, and that takes strength. She looked at him with watery eyes. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she whispered, "Thank you. No one ever says that to me here." The undercover boss wanted to do more, but he knew this was just the beginning. The truth was starting to unfold, piece by piece. He now understood the source of her pain. Her own manager, the very person who should have been guiding and encouraging her, was the one breaking her spirit instead. That evening, as he walked out of the store, his mind was filled with thoughts. He replayed her words again and again. He imagined her going home after a long shift, carrying not just the exhaustion of work but also the heavy weight of humiliation. And then, after all that, she still had to care for her sick mother and siblings. He thought about his own past, the struggles he faced when he was younger. He had once been in her shoes, working hard for every small paycheck, praying that one day things would get better. He had promised himself that if he ever became successful, he would treat his employees with respect, giving them a workplace where they felt valued. And yet here he was, discovering that within his own company, someone was suffering silently. The thought cut deeply into him. Leadership, he realized, wasn't just about building stores or increasing profits. It was about protecting people. And right now, he had failed to protect her. But that was about to change. He made a silent vow as he walked through the night, he would not allow her story to continue like this. He would gather the truth, confront the injustice, and make sure she and every worker like her was treated with dignity. The truth was painful, but it was also powerful. It had opened his eyes. And now, he knew what he had to do. This undercover mission was no longer about checking systems or numbers. It was about hearts, lives, and respect. And he was ready to fight for it. His days that followed were heavy. The undercover boss carried the cashier's story in his heart wherever he went. Her words echoed in his mind, how she needed this job to take care of her sick mother and her younger siblings, how she quietly endured insults because she could not afford to lose her hours. He thought about the fear in her eyes every time the manager walked near, and each memory made his chest tighten. Still, he remained in disguise. He reminded himself again and again that patience was important. If he revealed himself too soon, he might never see the full truth. He needed to witness everything with his own eyes and ears, no matter how painful it was. Only then could he bring justice in a way that could not be denied. One busy afternoon, the store was crowded again. Customers filled the aisles, children tugged at their parents, and shopping carts clattered against the tiled floor. The undercover boss worked near the counter, helping to bag groceries as he often did. This gave him the chance to stay close to the cashier, keeping an eye on her while blending in as a helpful new worker. At first, everything seemed normal. The cashier greeted each customer with her usual soft smile, even though her eyes showed exhaustion. She worked quickly, scanning items and carefully placing them into bags. The undercover boss admired her quiet strength. Despite everything she endured, she still treated customers kindly. But then the moment came that tested his patience like never before. The line had grown long, and one of the machines at the counter began to slow down. The cashier pressed buttons to fix the error, her hands moving quickly, but the delay caused the line to move slower than usual. A few customers started murmuring impatiently. That was when the manager appeared. He walked straight to the counter, his face tight with irritation. Without lowering his voice, he scolded her in front of everyone. "Why are you always so slow? Look at this line. You're holding everyone up." The cashier froze. Her cheeks turned red with embarrassment. She whispered, "I'm sorry, the machine," but he cut her off sharply. "Excuses. It's always excuses with you. If you can't handle this job, maybe I should find someone who can." The undercover boss felt his blood boil. His hands clenched around the shopping bag he was holding. Every muscle in his body wanted to step forward, reveal himself, and put an end to this humiliation right there. But he forced himself to stay still. He reminded himself, not yet. Not here. If I act now, the truth will be lost in anger. I need to be smart. He looked around. Customers were shifting uncomfortably, pretending not to notice but clearly aware of what was happening. Some glanced at the cashier with pity, others avoided looking altogether. The staff nearby lowered their heads, as if they had seen the scene too many times before. No one spoke up. The cashier swallowed hard and continued scanning items. Her hands shook, and a tear slipped down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, trying to hide it. The manager didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care. He shook his head and walked away with a mutter of disapproval. The undercover boss's heart broke. He wanted to comfort her, but in that moment, he also knew something else. This wasn't just about one worker. If the manager treated her this way, he likely treated others the same. He had to gather proof, to witness more, so that when the time came, no one could deny what was happening. After the rush ended, the cashier disappeared for her short break. The undercover boss followed quietly, making sure not to alarm her. He found her sitting alone in the break room, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders trembled as silent sobs escaped. He sat down gently a few seats away, not wanting to frighten her. "You don't deserve that," he said softly. She lifted her head quickly, wiping her tears. "I'm fine," she whispered. He shook his head. "You're not fine. I saw what happened. That wasn't fair. No one should talk to you like that." Her lips trembled. She tried to stay strong, but her eyes filled again. "It happens all the time," she admitted. "If I complain, he'll just cut my hours. He's already warned me before." The undercover boss felt anger rising again, but he kept his voice calm. "That's not right. You're working hard. I can see it. You don't deserve to be treated this way." She gave a weak smile, though it was filled with sadness. "Thank you. But I can't do anything. I just need this job too much." He nodded slowly, hiding the storm inside him. He wanted to say, "I am the boss. I can fix this for you right now." But he stayed quiet. He needed her trust, and he needed to see the full pattern of abuse before acting. That night, as he left the store, he could not sleep. He lay awake, thinking about everything he had seen. Every insult, every tear, every moment of humiliation, it all replayed in his mind like a cruel film. His hands clenched tightly as he thought, how many others has this manager hurt? How many more will suffer if I don't act soon? The next day, he returned with renewed determination. This time, he watched more closely than ever. He paid attention to how the manager spoke not only to the cashier but also to other employees. He noticed the harsh tone, the impatience, the constant criticism. It wasn't just her. The manager treated many workers the same way, though she seemed to bear the worst of it. The undercover boss began quietly taking mental notes, remembering details, and observing patterns. He was preparing for the day when he would reveal everything. But inside, he struggled. Every time he saw the cashier flinch under the manager's harsh words, he wanted to break his silence. Every time he saw her wipe away a tear, he wanted to stand up and tell the truth. It was the hardest test of patience he had ever faced. As a leader, he had handled business challenges, financial crises, and tough negotiations. But nothing had ever tested his heart like this. This was not about numbers or contracts. It was about dignity, humanity, and justice. By the end of the week, he knew he had reached his breaking point. He had seen enough. He could no longer stand by and watch someone suffer under his roof. He looked at himself in the mirror that evening. Behind the disguise, he saw not just a boss, but a man who carried responsibility for every person wearing his company's uniform. And he whispered to his reflection, "Tomorrow, the truth comes out." The undercover mission was almost over. The time for patience had ended. Now it was time for revelation and justice. The next morning, the undercover boss woke up with determination written across his face. For days, he had hidden behind the mask of a simple worker. He had carried boxes, stacked shelves, bagged groceries, and smiled like any ordinary employee. But inside, he had been silently watching, listening, and feeling every painful truth that unfolded before him. Now, the time for silence had ended. Today, the truth would be spoken. He dressed again in his simple clothes, the same disguise that had kept him hidden. But this time, he felt different. He no longer walked with the hesitation of a man in hiding. He walked with the quiet power of a man ready to change things. His heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with purpose. When he entered the store, the staff greeted him casually, unaware that the man standing before them was their employer. He smiled back, but inside, he was already preparing for the moment that would change everything. The day unfolded as usual at first. Customers filled the store, workers rushed to keep up, and the cashier once again stood at her post with a brave but tired smile. She greeted everyone with her usual soft kindness, even though her eyes still carried the shadow of sadness. The undercover boss watched her, knowing this would be the last day she would ever feel that way inside his company. It didn't take long before the manager appeared. Just as on other days, his tone was sharp, his words quick to cut. The cashier made a small error, nothing serious, just a small delay with the customer's receipt. But the manager pounced on the mistake, raising his voice in front of everyone. "Again? How many times do I have to repeat myself? You're slowing this store down. Maybe this job is just too much for you." The cashier's face fell. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, she seemed as though she wanted to disappear. Customers turned their heads uncomfortably, whispering to one another. And that was when the undercover boss knew this was the moment. He could not wait any longer. He stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "That's enough." The manager turned sharply, surprised. "Excuse me? Who are you to tell me what's enough?" The undercover boss removed his glasses slowly, his eyes locked firmly on the manager's. He straightened his back, and the quiet worker everyone thought they knew suddenly stood with a different kind of authority. "I'm the boss," he said firmly. "This company is mine." The room went silent. The cashier froze, her eyes widening in shock. Other employees dropped what they were holding, staring in disbelief. Even the customers looked stunned, whispering among themselves. The manager's face drained of color. He stammered, trying to speak, but no words came out. The undercover boss looked around at everyone. "For days, I have been here, working alongside you, watching, listening. I came undercover because I wanted to know the truth, not from reports or papers, but from real people, in real moments. And what I've seen has opened my eyes." He turned to the cashier. His voice softened. "I saw you wiping away tears while still smiling at customers. I saw how hard you worked, even when you were exhausted. And I heard the truth from you that you have been humiliated and threatened with fewer hours, even though you depend on this job to care for your family. No one should ever be made to feel that way." The cashier's lips trembled, tears filling her eyes, but this time they weren't just tears of pain, they carried relief, disbelief, and hope. The undercover boss then turned back to the manager, his tone now sharp with authority. "Your job was to lead, to guide, and to encourage the people who work here. Instead, you chose to tear them down, to humiliate them, to crush their spirits. That is not leadership. That is abuse. And I will not allow it in my company." The manager opened his mouth, searching for an excuse. "I was only trying to keep the store efficient." "Efficiency does not come from fear," the boss interrupted firmly. "Success does not come from humiliation. It comes from respect, teamwork, and care. You have failed at the very heart of what this company stands for." The entire store was silent. Every worker, every customer was watching. The air felt heavy, charged with truth and justice. The boss continued, his voice calm but unwavering. "Effective immediately, you are removed from this position. There is no place for cruelty in this company." The manager's shoulders slumped. He tried to protest again, but the power in the boss's words left no room for argument. Slowly, he walked away, his footsteps echoing through the quiet store. Once he was gone, the boss turned back to his employees. His expression softened again, his tone filled with sincerity. "I built this company with a dream that every person working here would feel valued, respected, and proud of what they do. But what I've seen here tells me I have not paid close enough attention. That changes today. From this moment forward, things will be different." He walked closer to the cashier, who still stood in shock, tears glistening on her cheeks. He smiled gently. "You are stronger than you realize. You have shown patience, kindness, and courage even in the hardest moments. You deserve respect, not insults. And you will get it from now on." Her voice shook as she whispered, "Thank you." The boss nodded. "No. Thank you for staying strong, for working so hard, and for reminding me why leadership matters. Starting today, you will not only keep your hours, but I am promoting you to a higher position. You'll have better pay, more stability, and the support you need to take care of your family." The cashier gasped, covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. This time, she didn't try to hide them. She let them fall freely, because they weren't tears of sadness anymore, they were tears of relief and gratitude. The other employees clapped softly at first, then louder, filling the store with a sound that carried hope. Customers smiled, some even joining in. The atmosphere had changed completely. The boss raised his hand, quieting the room. "This company is not just about selling products. It's about people. Without the people who stand behind these counters, who stock these shelves, who greet our customers every day, there is no company. You are the heart of this business. And I promise you, I will always remember that." He looked around at every face, making sure his words were felt. "If anyone here ever feels mistreated, you will not be ignored. I want honesty. I want fairness. And I want respect for each other. That is the only way forward." The staff nodded, some even smiling through their surprise. The cashier, still emotional, whispered again, thank you so much." The boss smiled warmly. "No, thank you for reminding me why I started this journey. This company is not mine alone. It belongs to all of us." That day ended not with sadness, but with hope. The cashier walked away knowing her life had changed. The employees walked away feeling valued for the first time in a long while. And the boss walked away with a deeper understanding of what leadership truly meant. It wasn't about profits or reports. It wasn't about charts and numbers. It was about people, their struggles, their dreams, their dignity. As he left the store that evening, the undercover boss looked back one last time. The lights glowed softly through the windows, but inside, something brighter shone, the spirit of people who finally felt seen. He smiled to himself and whispered, "This is only the beginning. From now on, every step I take will be for them." And with that, he walked into the night not just as a businessman, but as a true leader.